make sure that we provide training. And that is what it led to Africentric Parenting course, which we started July 2020. And on that note, we would like to say thank you to our sponsor that helped us to pilot Course 101. That is National Lottery Community Fund and County Durham. And also we got recently support from Together Middlesbrough and Cleveland, who they sponsor one of the cohorts, and for us to pilot 101. But the demand is so high, and that is why we said we need more of courses like this due to feedback we see from the parents. And we had 101, and we also launched 201. And thank God today, we are having a pilot phase 1 for Africentric Parenting course 301.
And we're here today because Save the Woman is implementing this idea of we need to equip people with the knowledge that will enable them to keep their children at home. So that is why we are here. And what we've done so far, for those who've been following what Save the Woman has been doing, is that we've had Africentric Parenting Course 101. And Course 101 basically was to give our parents the basics of what it means to parent in a new culture. So essential knowledge for parents. We then had Africentric Parenting Skills 201. And this is essential knowledge for parents who have teenagers and how to navigate bringing up teenagers in this very confusing world. And today we're here to look at Africentric Parenting Skills 301, which is about understanding parents in the context of equality and diversity. The person who's going to take us through this course is Dr. Sola Adesola. And she's a very interesting person to know. If you Google her, you'll find out that she's an innovative, talented, entrepreneurial, and versatile professional with over 20 years postgraduate experience. She's an equality and diversity lead, both in the university and outside of it. She's an author, she's a senior lecturer, and she's a visiting professor. And she has helped a number of people become PhDs. She's a coach. She actually helps people with their mock vivas, etc. She's a wife, a mother, and a grandmother, and an ordained minister of the gospel. So without further ado, I'd like us to welcome Dr. Sola Adesola, who will take us through her view of what we need to know, both as parents and as workers in the statutory sector, and as volunteers and workers in the charity sector. So over to you, Dr. Sola.
Thank you very, very much, Auntie Nana. Thank you very much for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are joining this afternoon, London, Glasgow, Middlesbrough. I'm from the Midlands. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Thank you, Olalekon Odediji, for inviting me. Save the Woman. 2 years ago, that was my first experience of participating in Save the Woman. And yes, I had a good experience in Middlesbrough, with Olalekon and the team, the powerful team that she is working with. So this afternoon, I am coming on board to just maybe whet our appetites. I'm not, I don't work in the social services, but I'm coming from policy perspective. That's what I'm bringing on board is really to challenge us. I think the introduction has been said already, and I'm really trying to bring it from the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion from this. So let me just share my screen, and then with the time that we have, we'll see how we can get on. So I have actually titled my talk this afternoon, Influence of Policy Towards a More Inclusive Parenting Competence. I'm going to start from the premise of ethnicity and cultural perspective, and I will share some of the findings that actually came from research. Because as academic, I can't just come and talk to you. I have to do my work, even though I'm not an expert in the social services, but I am an expert from policy perspective. And I want everybody to see from policy, to see how things can be improved. Like I said, I am a parent, I am a mother, and I'm a grandmother. This course, everything that they have been doing, Save the Woman, if when, in the early 90s, when I started my own, family, if I had the opportunity of listening, sitting down like this and listening, maybe some of the things that we have gone through as part of parenting may not have happened. So it's really a combination of speaking from experience, but also what does the policy actually say that can help us to improve on parenting skill. So I will start from the research, what the research has done, and then move on to government regulation. And then I'll finish, because this is more of stakeholder. I want to by asking the stakeholders in the room and the parents, how do we move forward in terms of joining hands together? So I hope the time will allow me to be able to do that. So I'm not spending a lot of time on introduction because there isn't enough time to actually go through. I have to take out a lot of slides, from my presentation. So I think the whole idea of this cohort, this particular cohort, is part of the general agenda of Save the Woman to try to improve our understanding of helping services, social services, and the agencies, the stakeholders involved, to improve the communication between parents and the stakeholders. So that's a lot of the issues that parenting are experiencing. We can find a middle ground. A middle ground to work forward, to move forward in this agenda of parenting skill and also the social services. I don't know how many people have heard it, maybe it's an African adage that it takes a village to raise a child, and it is very, very true. In African culture, and I said maybe Black culture, it's not just the parent that bear children. People they also have a role and contribution to raise the child to the point where they are destined to be. So while the parents have the primary responsibility, but actually the community, the extended family, they have a primary role, secondary role to play. So it takes a village to raise a child. But now that a lot of the Black people have come into the UK, we have been faced with cultural shock. We have been faced with having to adapt the Black culture, the African culture, the Caribbean culture into the English culture. And so most parents are in a cloud 9, catch-22 situation. How should we raise our children? Because we cannot keep our children at home. They have to mingle with their friends and their colleagues in schools, in universities, in the workplace. But the primary thing is at the beginning of their life, when they started, the nursery school, and then they move on to primary school, and then from there to secondary school. The formative stage are very, very important for those who are born in the United Kingdom, and even those that we brought from our original country to the United Kingdom. That change and adaptation, where do I fit in, is a confusing state for a lot of children. And so I think that's where, this course, which they have been trying to do, is supposed to educate all of us, both parents and also the agencies involved in social services. Right, okay, I want to start by asking us this question. If I had more time, I actually wanted to make it to be able to break into maybe a small breakout session, but because of the time, I will not be able to do that. So we'll do it as a group. How is parenting in Black and minority ethnic families understood in the United Kingdom context? Many of you are coming from different organizations, councils, social services. A lot of parents are here. But how is parenting in BME community? How is it understood in the UK context? I'll just give maybe 1 minute, and then maybe 1 or 2 people can just share an insight, not long because of time, but I really like, yes, thank you very much, Dr. Okonko. Please go ahead, please.
I'm greeting everyone.
I think you raised your hand. I saw a hand, Dr. Liz.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, doctor?
Is that a hand?
Can you hear me?
Okay. How is parenting? Can somebody just share with us, how is parenting understood in the UK?
Can you hear me, doctor? Hello?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, hello. Thank you, Dr. Sola. Apologies for not breaking the camera at the moment, but I will later. Like yourself, I'm a mother and a scientist. And to answer this question specifically, I feel that Black and ethnic minority families are not understood by the UK generally. The education system, the social sciences system, even though raising children is more or less the same, whatever our cultural backgrounds, but the issues that systemic problems face parents also seem to face the children, because there's certain assumptions made, and there's also fear on both sides, I have to say, to be fair, that the teachers seem to fear our parents and our children, and our parents fear the education system and social services, that if we miscommunicate, that's it. There's no coming back, there's no second chances. We break some kind of rule, invisible as it may be, and our children and ourselves are labelled, and often our children are taken from us.
Wow, thank you very much. I think there's a lot that you mentioned there, and I will definitely, look at some of them later on as I progress. But you raised, quite a good point. Systemic problem, a lot of assumption, a lot of fear in the mind of our children, and communication, some misinterpretation, especially when it comes to nudges, when it comes to languages, when it comes to cultural adaptation between maybe African Caribbean culture and the UK culture, having to adapt, and maybe change, bend, the way we are brought up to fit it into the UK culture. And of course, the rule, what is the rule of the game? And this is where perhaps the stakeholders will come in. What are those silent rules of the game that perhaps the African and Caribbean parents, they don't quite understand it, they don't get it? Because one is actually maybe lack of ignorance or lack of education, or perhaps the integration between the parents and the stakeholders are still missing. So thank you for raising those points. And I'm asking that because I don't want to just be speaking all the time. I want us to internalize some of these points, take them back to wherever, for those who are coming from social services, council, to take them back to your team and have a meeting about it. I'll make this slide available and just deliberate upon it, see, okay, these are the issues which have been raised, even from research, through focus group, through interviews of parents. So I want everybody to just go back and say, well, this is what has come from this meeting. Let's see how we can begin to put our heads together and see where there are gaps in our own processes and our system. And then see how we can join up thinking again to move forward in the right direction. That is the whole purpose of today. So I'm not going to be speaking as an expert on social services. No, that's not what I'm come to do, but I'm coming to just whet our appetite, show us some of the real facts that are out there already. So thank you. So for this one, I'm not going to read all the text line by line. That's why I've specifically, highlighted some of the key points. So ethnicity and culture in parenting. Like I said, I'm from Nigeria. Even though I was born in the UK, I was sent back home many, many, many years ago because my parents were studying here. I was sent back home, came back again, but I grew up in Nigeria. So my education was in Nigeria. My foundation was in Nigeria. So coming back to the UK to meet with my parents and my siblings that were grown up in the UK, I still find myself in a cultural shock. And so the parents from different ethnic background differ in their parenting style. Okay, the way I brought up my children, I don't want them to be lost. I still wanted to have some African Nigerian values. But then my children are born here. They are born and bred in the UK. So having that cultural shock, because they'll be telling me, well, that's your mom. You are born in Nigeria. I'm born here. So trying to pitch the two things, you're trying to make sure that they are not losing their cultural values, but we know that they are in the United Kingdom. They mingle with their friends and their colleagues in the United Kingdom. So how do we marry the two together? So parenting style differ from different backgrounds. So the way Nigerians will bring up their children, quite different from the South Asian, something different from, and I will look at some of the statistics later on as well. So there's parenting style, there's parenting competence. Like I said, I've done my research to try and understand so that I'm not just coming as head knowledge, but I'm coming with some real things that are happening out there. And for you to enable you to be able to go back and dialogue within your own team and within the parenting as well. So there is something called parenting competence, skills that perhaps influences the way and the style that we parent our children. And of course, we know that because we are immigrants into the United Kingdom, we are likely to be influenced by our social environments, the community in which we find ourselves. So in my own case, I'm African and Nigerian, but I have my own community. And my community that I tend to associate most is a Christian community. So there is the religious aspect of it, the social environment, and then the complexity of trying to acculturalize between the UK and the African culture. These are not easy things at all, unless we are deceiving ourselves. And it brings a lot of pressure to try and meet the standard of the UK and also where we're coming from. So there tends to be a cultural shock, a conflict between parents and also children, because sometimes they don't know where they fit in. Am I Nigerian? Am I UK? Where do I actually fit in? And so invariably, the parents have found themselves over the years trying to adjust their cultural values and their parenting practices or style to meet the UK standard. Well, my question is, what actually is a UK standard? Okay, so that is a question to be asked. And so the Africentric parents have, over the years, they are beginning, or they have begun to make their parenting style to be more authoritarian. Okay, so because they still don't want to lose the original values, their country of origin, the values that are coming from there. So what they see is that they want to be able to stand their ground, so that their children, even though they're in the UK, but they are not completely lost into the values that we feel is not going to pay our children. So it's a catch-22 situation. I pity the children because sometimes they're just lost, especially when it comes to identity crisis. They're not really born into African country. They are born here, but their parental origin are African, and they're, and so they have to marry the two together. The last point here is about the different approaches that we often use to help us to understand the interconnectedness within communities. Like I said, I belong to a community. So I'm bringing my cultural values to mix with my connectedness within the community. In this case, it's a religious, connectivity. A lot of us here will have our own connections. It might be the social connection, extended families, but we are integrating into different networks. And so those networks, provide a succor. Sometimes when we are losing it, when we don't actually know how to do it, we can say we have a network there, a community, a larger community, where we can approach for wisdom on how to go about things. So that diversity of cultural approach also help us to be able to understand perhaps best practice, good practices of how things can be done better. So there's a power in community and there's a power in the interconnectedness, the integration within our community. Okay, this slide leads me to the research that was conducted. And this is actually a kind of a postdoctoral, a PhD research that somebody did at the University of York. It was just by coincidence as part of my research to say, okay, let me just try and find out what is happening out there. I don't want to come and speak just anyhow. And there are a lot of questions that this researcher asked. What is the relationship between the BME parent experiences of being, of being assessed for parenting competence and social workers' experiences of conductive parenting capacity? We know that when it comes to social care and taking children out of their home, they have to go through a very prolonged assessment to ensure that those children have been placed in the right home. Now, do parents from BME find those assessments problematic? What is the assessment? Is there any research on getting the views and opinions of the BME families on how they have gone through those assessments? in placing their children in social care? And are those families being included in the assessment process? And this is where inclusivity and EDI also fit in. All this is about, is this fair? Am I included? Is my voice being heard? Do we have BME in the assessment process? And what aspects of culture have been inculcated in that parenting capacity? So on that note, I want to just show you some quick, I may not be able to read everything. Like I said, I will make the slide available for Ola to pass to share with everyone that will be interested. Research was done and parents were asked series of questions that relates to their parenting style. So the themes were generated from those questions on tradition, religion, acculturation, protection, identity, some subjective perceptions later on. If you look at the tradition, one person says, I remember my mother teaching me these things when I had my first child. She used to say that you have to feed children warm things so that they get some warmth in their body. And she will say, that is not good always, to always carry a child when he cries. Sometimes you have to just leave them cry. There is truth in it, because I remember those days as well. You know, that's the way, I mean, I was brought up by my grandmother. So I'm even very much kind of a local, very local person. So sometimes parents will just leave their children to cry because it's part of the crying. They believe that it will strengthen them, it will build them, that they are not going to be, because children, sometimes baby can cry because they need attention. So there is something about the tradition there. But of course, this lady says, the lady from the social services didn't understand these traditional things. So that might be a problem. So when we're talking about assessment process, there's an aspect of let's try and understand the tradition, where these people are coming from. So that is a Ugandan mother. The other person, a lot of this tradition did not mean much to me when I was in Ghana, but somehow they have become important since I came to England. And I don't want my children to lose sight of that Ghanaian identity. So for me, language, behavior, and the dressing are important. Okay, we can look at discipline, a Nigerian mother will say, okay, I love my children, but I have to discipline them. Okay, there's nothing wrong in that. For those who are Christians in our midst, he says, you know, we can discipline our children, but we know that over the years in the United Kingdom, that's what discipline is beginning to be diminished in our society. Okay, and this lady says, even the Bible says that you chastise those, those who love. But he says, that is where they say spare the rod and spoil the child. So that's the question of discipline. So when we're talking about tradition, each ethnic minority groups have different ways of disciplining their children. And if you don't understand that, society might feel that they're abusing their children. Now, on the point of religion, this is quite interesting and depends on how you look at it. One says, I use the church to teach my children how to behave. I will not read the rest because of time. Another person says, when it actually comes to the discussion of sex and contraception, which most parents find difficult of African background, is something that is a taboo. We find it so big that we cannot even talk to our teenagers about it. But this person said, well, I'll use the church to teach my children how to behave. You might want to ask, is it the church responsibility to teach your children? Because obviously, as parents, we have our responsibility. We are being given, these children are given to us as gifts. So is it the church? Should we wait for the church to teach our children how to behave? So you might want to look at it. Your interpretation of it might differ, but these are coming from real people out of interview. And then as we move on to acculturation, it says smacking. This has caused a lot of problems in the UK. Okay, this one says, I never liked it as a child, so coming to the UK was a good way to try a new way of disciplining my children. But then the trouble is, it's not easy to change. My husband thinks that the child is the mother's responsibility, and so it doesn't help at all. This is difficult in a country where we don't have support. So this is, you can see smacking, discipline, and the role of the father in the house. delegating the responsibility of discipline to the mother. Should it be just the mother doing it, or should it just be both parents doing it? Then protection says, when your child comes back home and says to you that another child was teasing them because of their accent or because of the color of their skin, you make sure that your child does not continue to play with those children. Please remember that these are not my words. These are coming from what we call an interview with real parents out there, listening to their concerns so that things that might be improvement and recommendation for improvement. Okay, so many of the children, especially if they are coming from abroad and they are brought up, they are now coming here, will have issues of accent. So myself, even though I've lived in this country for many years, I still have my accent. And to be honest, I refuse to change it because somehow it just doesn't change. Sometimes I try to maybe change my tone, but it just doesn't. And so I have to accept that this is who I am. So identity, if the child loses sight of their Africanness, they lose their essence, and it is only a matter of time before they become a burden to society. The identity of a child is important, and that's why the cultural values mixed with ethnicity and that nature of Africanness or Caribbeanness becomes really important as part of their sense of belonging, their identity of this is who I am. And so when they are being brought up in the UK and they have to mix, obviously, because you do as the Romans do, that's what we are told, but also making sure that the children are not losing their Africanness or Caribbeanness. These are also what the parents are saying. Okay, then still on that preconception. So the issue of culture, these parents said, we have been asked about our culture. We have been asked about, are we religious? We have been asked about what type of food do we feed our children? What type of cultural activities do we do? And then the other thing is that I don't think there's a genuine attempt to understand why we parent the way we do. As far as we're concerned, the only right way to parent children is the way that it is done in this country. It did not matter what I said to her, I was only going to be wrong. Now, this is a way of, you find yourself in kind of, you are neither here nor there. So let me just leave it to the society. Let me just join them, because whatever we say, we're never going to win. That's what I'm getting from this quotation of a parent in the area of preconception. And then the last one, which is about competence and confidence, I just extract this. It says, like I keep saying in our meeting, some of them are never going to change their views, no matter what you say to them. It is better if you just go along with them. After all, this is their country, their rules. It calls for us to just reflect, to pause for a minute about the concerns of parenting in the United Kingdom. And if by the way, this is 2017 research. So it's still very recent. So if these are coming from research, then it begs a question: what can we do? How can we get into the community where we are associated with to try and listen out more to what the parents are facing, and how to come together, join up thinking. So on social workers, because this research look at both parents and the role of social workers. How do social workers assess parenting competence of Black and minority ethnic group? Again, some of the direct responses. I don't think culture and ethnicity should be ignored. Everybody should be treated the same. Another person said, this is white British social worker, I personally don't think it should make a difference what the parent's background is. Don't get me wrong. I know that culture and ethnicity is important. I just don't think it should influence the outcome of assessment. Now, I will ask you, if there's opportunity, maybe the Q&A, what is your current assessment process that you have in place? Is culture embedded into that? What are the themes that have been embedded into the assessment process when it comes to social services and child care? The problems is that we know about parenting is based on Eurocentric views and Western research. It does not necessarily apply to people from different backgrounds. So that is the viewpoint from a Black African social worker. And then we can look at it. Because of time, maybe I will not be able to read everything. But on the professional experience, so the social workers were asked about their social experience, professional experiences. And one says, you build more confidence from working with parents from Black and minority ethnic background. This is what helps you to understand how culture and ethnicity influences the way they parent. Now, when it comes to the selection process of social worker, the recruitment, the hiring of social worker, and the assessment procedure when it comes to social care, placing children in social care. What is the selection process look like? How many of the BME social worker are embedded into that and assign them to participate in that assessment process? This is where this social worker is reflecting on. He said, I don't think you can do a good job no matter which assessment tool you use. Another person says, you do need a certain level of experience to be able to interpret and break some of the barriers that stand in the way of assessing Black and ethnic minority parents. And specifically, they talk about the language, the subtle cultural norms, the nudges, the interaction that take place between parents and children. And so sometimes it may require experts, a sense of actually interaction with the community to be able to get a sense of their thinking, how they interact with their children. Some of the languages that we use at home that perhaps if you use it outside may be regarded as, no, this is not acceptable. This is not up to UK standard. And so professional experience and the assessment of parenting competence from the views of social workers are also important. So it's not just about looking at the parenting, but also let's take a self-reflection of the social worker and their role as social worker to see where there are gaps and areas that we can bridge that gap. So now that brings me now to this report. And it's just a coincidence that I came across this. I was looking for something else in relation to our own organization because I'm part of my university's race equality agenda. So I contribute to policy and strategic planning. And then one of my colleagues, shared, oh, everybody go and read this new report, which is the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. And as I was reading it, then I saw education, I saw parenting, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. So it's not just university. It cuts across the whole fabric of the society. So this is about family, this is about education, because what happens in the family affects children's education and their educational performance. So actually I kept it in my Word document. And then when Ola asked me to come and share something in the last program, I started from this by saying, there is something about policy that parents need to be aware of, not to be ignorant of what is happening. Because if you are ignorant of what is happening in the society, then you find yourself being a victim of the said ignorance of the law is not an excuse. We need to know what is happening in our environment. And so when asked me to just share one or two things, I started from this policy side. And so I want to now look at what is the government saying about race and ethnic disparity from the perspective of the agency and inclusivity, okay? They had four main aims. One is to build trust between the different communities and institutions, to promote greater fairness that relates to education, then create agency in order to take control of the decision-making that impact life, and then to achieve genuine inclusivity. So I'm not going to go through everything because of time. I just want to focus on two main areas. The reports, it can be downloaded online. If not, I will send the PDF file to Ola for those who want to have a look at it. So I'm not going to focus on build trust and promote fairness. It's primarily on education and how the behavior, what is going on inside the family can impact children's performance. And they have maybe, when they're not doing very well in school, we need to go back to the family, their behavior. So that is really what their class, gender, socioeconomic status. So I want to look more into the creating agency. And then there are about a lot of recommendations, but recommendation 19 says, undertake a support for families. Undertake a review to investigate actions to address the underlying issues facing family. And that's why we're all here today. What can we do to improve family? What can we, because this is the basic background, the basic foundation and the fabric of every society. And then looking at inclusivity, what are the recommendations that the government has put together in terms of, you can see, create police workforce, equip the police, and then data. So I'm not going to look into all of them because of time. So this is the creating agency. And what they are trying to do is to look more into the family setting, because the government realized that if you are talking about race and disparity, obviously it affects, families coming from different ethnic groups are affected. How are they affected by race and disparity in the society? So they look at a number of areas, issues. They want to collect data about family strain, and I'll look at that later. They want to do some academic research on cultural attitude and parenting, the impact of employment and working practices. If parents are not working, what is the impact of that on the development of children and how it might impact on their educational performance? So it's kind of a cycle. One affects the other. And then looking more into the more complex understanding of fatherhood. So the role of fatherhood, if the government is thinking about this, then who are we not to take it seriously, to see that actually the family is so important. And if everything is messed up in the family, the society also is messed up. And so the government is taking it seriously that we need to go back to the basic. I remember Tony Blair many years ago, we all said we all need to go back to the basic. But of course, that basic, I don't know whether we're still back in the basic, but say something needs to go back to the basic. And so the fatherhood in different ethnic groups and the role of culture and religion in family outcome. So you can see that even here, our different faith, community of faith becomes even important, because the government recognizes that ethnic minority groups, they have powerful network, they have powerful community. Some of these communities are culturally based, some of these are religion based. So mosque, Christian, synagogue, we have powerful network that we see as somewhere that we can report to, we can draw strength from. When everything around us is failing us, we can say, oh, I have a community. Okay, I'm very proud of my community where I belong to. So the government also is realizing and recognizing that there is a role that culture and religion can play in the family outcome. And I want us to bear that in mind in every processes that we are developing, that we're not losing sight of what the government is thinking about and how we can work on it. So from the recommendation now leads to the actions. So these are the action plan that the government has put forward in terms of policy. So education is important. Going back to the basic, the early years from nursery, from primary, going into primary school, how can we better provide support system for primary school, from nursery school, for secondary school, and working with parents. And of course, making sure that the school parent contact are so strong that the parents feel that they have the voice in the educational development of their children, that they are not seen as an outsider, but they are integrated into the system. So education is important. Employment is also an action point, because where parents, just before now, I was in another program, even though it was kind of a Christian one, but there was a lady that was sharing her experience, that what she went through as a single parent, because of divorce, that she felt isolated, she felt neglected, she felt, a lot of mockery, she felt more or less, I don't belong. but then she has to cater for our children. She said it was a struggle for her even to get a job, but then somehow boldness came upon her. She just went into the one workplace and said, I want a job. Somehow the courage just came and she got that job because the employer saw her level of courage to just come forward and say, I need a job. So unemployment leads to so many issues. And so here the government is also recognizing that, encouraging employers to look at flexible working for parenting. Flexible working, and I think a lot of organizations, they are looking into that. Somehow, the lockdown actually has tested all the models that we can actually do a lot of work from home without losing our productivity. So maybe that's another area of trying to encourage when they are discussing with parents what is affordable, what is flexible, so that at least they can see that they are also in engagement, they are engaged in doing something. They can find their hands doing something and contribute to their family. Now, crime and policing. This is important because when children are not doing well, they start behaving in a way that will lead them into criminal activities. And that's because there are dysfunctionality in family and police get involved. Now, because we are talking about race and equality, even within the crime and policing, how do we have BME police in working collaboratively with the ethnic families? So the interaction between police and the parents, and especially also during out of court disposal processes. So these are action plan that the government, these are not mine. Please, I need to make sure that everybody hears me, that these are not my points. Like I said, I'm just whetting the appetite for people to think about, wow, this is out there. And then health. We know that a lot of things have happened. Mental health and how that affects family therapy, breakdown, and disproportionality and dysfunctionality in the family. So how can the social services work collaboratively with families to identify specific areas of need and provide that support without making them feel that without being judged, but to look at them and say, well, this is a problem, how can we help you? So I think that's really what this is about. And so this report was actually been approved by the Commissioner for Children. So there's a children commissioner, and I look at their report as well to see what they are doing. And so there seems to be an alignment between this report and the focus of the children's commissioner in England. Apparently, I understand they're also doing a survey on the big ask. So maybe this is something that the social services, the statutory agencies can also key into if they have not done that. Okay, I'm worried my time is going very quickly, so I need to just round up very soon. So this is on inclusivity. And recommendation 21 says, create police workforces that represent the communities they serve. So if there have been problems within the BME community about taking children to care, the children are not behaving in a way that they should be, and it's leading to criminal activities. Have we integrated police workforces that understand this community of people from ethnicity, from cultural perspective, from religious perspective? So recruitment is important. Again, I didn't put this word forward. I'm just giving you what I have read. So they are suggesting recruit locally. Look at the nuances of eligibility. So for example, in my own workplace, as part of our own recruitment, even of our own academics, I have to put forward what is called a recruitment checklist from the before, during, and after. So when you're going through recruitments, what are the checklists? What are the nuances that we need to be aware of? The language of the job description, where those jobs are being advertised. Is it in the web newspapers, where a lot of BME, newspapers that they are reading, community where they are serving? Do we make those advertisements publicly available, or is it just in Daily Mail, Daily Telegraph? And most African people, probably they will not be reading that. So where are we advertising these jobs to integrate police workforces into our community? pipeline in terms of career progression and promotion? Are we recruiting, are we advancing the career of BME police workforces? Remember, we are talking about inclusivity as it affects social services, as it affects social care of BME. How are we improving on that? So looking at the pipeline and then our engagement and outreach with a number of communities. So that is what they are thinking about in terms of improving of inclusivity. And then, of course, equipping the police service with skills that they will need to be able to integrate, to understand. So those language issues, those cultural nudges that the parenting are bringing out, and of course, the social worker as well. The police also have a role for them to feel that they are equipped to understand this issue without forcing them straight into the police, police office, but to try and let's make it a collegiate environment, understand the issues where they're coming from in order to help in alleviating some of the problems that the BME community are experiencing. So evaluate recruitment pilots that match the candidates' life skills with the needs of the community they serve. I think this is important, the communities they serve. So in Middlesbrough, for example, do we have police forces that have been allocated and assigned to that community where a lot of issues are coming from? In Glasgow, in London, in other areas where you are representing today? Have you looked at the different joined up thinking, the stakeholders who are directly and indirectly impacted by the inclusivity of social care in each area, in each region, and what can be done in terms of recommendation to equip these different stakeholders? Okay, I think I'm going to skip this one because I know Ola is looking at me right now. But these are some of the essential measures, which again, the government has put to the Children's Commissioner. What I've done is to put my sources for those who want to read further, and I'll make this available. So they are actually asked, making recommendation. Let's improve on nurturing. Let's improve on providing the right help to develop good language, other cognitive skills. Let's improve on managing the behavior, our emotions. Let's improve on improving on both physical and mental illness. That's again, access to healthcare. So these are what the Children's Commissioner are recognizing as the need to stabilize family units in the United Kingdom. So I'm going to skip this one. I think this one, I may have mentioned some of them. These are some of the cultural tradition, family and integration. I've mentioned the family structure, some of the problem with family, destabilization in the families, breakdown, and how that can lead to other problems. So let me move on. These statistics, I think they are important. Family breakdown, as of 2020, it says 14.7% of families in the UK were lone parent families. That's about 2.9 million. Now, when you look at the Black Caribbean children that have grown up in lone parents, 63% are recorded. And when you look at Black other ethnic groups, 62% of children have this record of family breakdown. On this side, what is interesting is, I think I was talking to somebody that I'll be interested to know, when you compare the mixed ethnicity, the Black, African, and South Asian and Chinese ethnic groups, it says they have much lower rates when it comes to family breakdown. Now, let's try to understand it. Maybe it's a study that the social services through the government needs to do. Okay, what is the difference between how the South Asian and the Chinese raise their children? Because also they are immigrants to the United Kingdom. So what makes them different? What are the things that we can learn from them without losing our Africanness and Caribbeanness? Now, I think it's important. Data are important to help us to think forward. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat myself. So issue of divorce, lone parents, and male responsibility. So this is kind of a fatherhood in the family. Please remember also that this is not my thoughts. This is what the government is thinking about. And we also have data from the Office of National Statistics. So they recognize that male fathers have a role in the society and in our family. And so the welfare state and the growing affluence, they said it has made things actually even difficult because the standard of living has increased. Perhaps maybe male feel that, there's a lot of competition and they cannot, cope with that. And that is maybe creating some problems in the society, underlying issues. But I think there's a need, there's something about the Asian family, which is said is notable, pointing to different cultural values or expectation. So if they have a far lower rate of family breakdown, what are they doing that perhaps the other ethnic minority groups are not doing? What can we learn from them and to benchmark best practices? And I think that's a point that we can all, take cognizance of. Okay, this is a study from the US, but it's really about the father absence. The father absence in families have major repercussion in educational performance, educational, emotional development, and adult mental health. I'm going to leave that because that also leads to the family strain, which I mentioned earlier, that leads to communication issues, parenting, struggle with special needs, parental breakup, and other emotional imbalances. So I'll leave that one there. I think what I want to do now is, let me just go quickly because of time. I think from the Children's Commissioner, there's some messages from the social worker in terms of the field that children's, also reported when they change placements, they feel that it leads to instability and chaos when they move children from one place to another place. It was really odd having to keep meeting new people. It is nice to just have a stable, knowing the same person, because it keeps changing and you don't even know who they are. And they meet you and they're like, okay, you feel a bit like, what's the word? You feel as if you don't know what is happening, as if the word is happening and you don't know what is going to happen. That is an 11-year-old person. And you think that at that age, they'll be more stabilized. But if they keep moving them, that's instability. So look at a female 15. It makes your life quite unstable because everything is like changing all the time. And it is like there is not consistency with the person that you should be able to trust if you keep moving them. And this is age 15. So you can imagine at that age 15, what do you expect? Instability, lack of trust. They can't trust adults because they keep moving them from one place to another. That is a voice coming from the Children's Commissioner, the children's voice. So we have heard something from the parent, we've heard something from the social worker, now we've heard something from the children themselves. So looking at those three parties, when we begin to plug them into the stakeholders and where they fit in, where do we go? So my last two slides is, so what can we begin to do? What can social services do to better understand the experiences and the outcome of minority parents and children in care? Who are the allies? Allies are important. These are the people that you bring on your side to help you to engage better with the different groups. Create an environment where crucial, these are very difficult. When we talk about race, disparity, discrimination, these are uncomfortable conversations that needs to be heard. And so we need to find that inclusive environment where conversation can be heard between the social services, the government agencies, the parents, and even sometimes the children, if we feel that they are in that mental capacity to understand what is going on, we need to bring them on board. Start with educating social workers and social services staff about what is Africentric culture. That may be needed to be integrated into their staff handbook, their courses, and other things that makes them to be social worker and understand parents and children lived experiences. Okay, so I am in higher education and issues of discrimination, it's cut across every industry. And so what we are saying is that, okay, the university also needs to understand our lived experiences. So in the same way, let's try and understand the lived experiences of parents and children, where they're coming from, so that we're not just imposing our own system, our own processing. Let's hear, let's listen to them, and then we can meet halfway. So this is my last slide, which is looking at the next step. So I'm asking the question now, how do we individually, you and I, and collectively as the agency in the United Kingdom, different stakeholders, how can we create, sorry for that typo there, an inclusive parenting community. This is a very simple matrix, okay? So you have commitment level versus the care, okay? So this is low and high level. So obviously, if the organization, if we right now at the end of today and we say, okay, we want to tap into this, we want to move forward, we want to begin to do things forward, okay? So we have a high level of commitments to social services, to better improve social care. And we know that our care is at the optimum level. So it's high on the care and high on our commitment. That means that we begin to raise champions. Who are the champions in the organization that will understand the commitment and also the care for what we are talking about today? So the champions are very important. Okay, if the care is on the low side of it and the commitment of the organization is low, it's just an apathy. This is the last place we want to be because it's low on the commitment level and also low on the care. It just becomes, well, we don't care. On the lip service, where a lot of organizations are, we like to talk about it. Okay, so it's very lip service in terms of low here, but actually when it comes to our commitment, we are interested in it, but it's still not getting us to the next level. It's a lip service. There's a desire to do it, but maybe the will is not there. So that's a lip service. The top here is that there's a high commitment from individuals, from organizations on how to engage better. But actually when it comes to care, it's on the low level. So it's compliance, it's ticking the boxes, which is a lot of race equality agenda is more on, let's just comply. To show that we are committed. So we put in a statement out there, public statement, that we are an equal opportunity, that we are an inclusive organization, that we place our children, we provide fair and safe environment. That is tick boxes. Do we actually show genuine care and inclusivity? So that is where I'm going to leave, so that when we come to the Q&A, if you have questions, not just me that will answer them, I can assure that a lot of experts in the room, that we can all join our thinking together. And hopefully at the end of today, we can say, okay, maybe 1 or 2 areas that you can take back to your respective organization and say, let's begin to work on this. And I'll stop from there. Thank you very much for listening. And I hope I've done some justice, to just whet our appetite. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is mind-blowing, well resourceful, well detailed. Thank you, Dr. Sola. I'm very sure a lot of us, we've got some questions to raise, and I'm very sure we'll come back to that shortly. But before we proceed, we need to take a break just for 5 minutes, and then we'll bring on our next person that will talk about alternative way again. And I'm very sure you've all blessed with what Pastor Dr. Sola Adesola, what she just blessed us with this afternoon. We need to understand the diverse needs of families and the children. I'm very sure there are a lot of social workers also on this platform today, and they are going to contribute as well. So let's take a